Hi everyone, my name is Leah Kopke and I'm a 3D motion design freelancer. I also have a podcast where each week I cover another 3D modeling tool for Cinema 4D. Hi everyone, today's episode is a big deal. And here's why. We are covering the Polygon pen tool, which is the king of mesh modeling tools, I feel, because although it's a tool, it can do a lot of the things that the other tools can do that we've covered already. So it feels a little bit more like a toolbox in that sense. It can do so much. It can feel really freeing to learn because there is so much you can do with it. Another great thing that I'd like to point out is just how much you've learned at this point, because after this episode, we're going to be jumping into a whole other subject and another kind of 3D modeling that we haven't covered yet. I'd just like to show you the manual really quick for Cinema 4D to give you an idea of how much you know and how much you've learned. So you can see here, if I click on the mesh menu here, most of these tools we've covered already. There's only a few that we haven't covered yet in this entire chapter of the manual on mesh modeling on the mesh menu. And here's what we haven't covered yet. We haven't covered the symmetry tools, and we haven't covered volume mesh. And we haven't covered the tool we're covering today, so by the end of today you'll know it and it'll be like finishing that chapter, because the symmetry tools and volume mesh are actually used also with the sculpting tools, which we will be covering next. But at this point, you can feel like you know most of the mesh tools available, and you can feel like you are pretty proficient and advanced in this form of modeling. So I'm really, really excited about that, and I hope you feel really, really proud of that. Most professionals don't know all the tools you've learned so far, unless if they specialize in 3D modeling itself rather than animation and the other potential 3D categories you could specialize in, like texturing. Something else I'd like to point out to you is that these mesh modeling tools, you'll find that the base of knowledge you have with these will also carry over into learning how to 3D model with nodes and capsules. You'll notice that many of these tools here, if we were to go into our asset browser, if we go into our asset browser and we look under operators, you'll see that many of the things we've covered already will look very, very familiar in here. And the names are the same. You know, the iron tool, you know, smooth edges, you know, set flow, reverse normals. You know most of these. And these are also used in here. We are going to get into this eventually, so I just want you to be familiar with that this is why I wanted to cover this first. It's because this builds that base knowledge you need in order to learn things like 3D modeling with nodes. And it's also great base knowledge for if you want to learn sculpting as well, I'd argue. Since the Polygon pen is one of the most powerful tools, it's also one of the most complicated tools for mesh modeling. So it can feel very intimidated. So if you feel intimidated by this, that's okay. I'm going to give you some tips to practice so that you feel like this is a piece of cake and it's just muscle memory after a while. What I suggest you try doing is making abstract art. Rather than trying to make something really specific, abstract art is a form of art that will give you the opportunity to practice the hotkeys and really focus in on just the process of creation, rather than getting your head wrapped up in making something specific. Abstract art is unique in the sense where its main focus is the process. And sometimes it's more about the process than how it looks at the end of doing it, which I really love about abstract art. It's a great way to build up that muscle memory of the hotkeys. It's a great way to build up muscle memory of what you can do with this tool so that when you're 3D modeling something specific, it comes naturally and you don't even have to think about it. You'll be able to do this in your sleep if you practice enough. And this is the way I suggest you practice it. Once you start feeling comfortable with it, you can apply it to anything else you want to. I was into abstract art before I ever learned 3D modeling, before I ever learned motion graphics, before I ever went to school for industrial design. So this is really at my core of where I started, was abstract art. I took an oil painting class at the Art Institute of Chicago when I was in high school, and I remember the one that really clicked with me the most was when we started creating abstract art. It just clicked with me. It made sense. It was about portraying emotions with color and shape and grabbing inspiration from music and experimenting and trying out different things. And it was about the process, and that just really resonated with me. And I think you may have fun with it. So I hope you do. And I'm super excited, so let's just jump into Cinema 4D and start 3D modeling. We'll go through all the hotkeys and all the settings you need to know. So here we are in Cinema 4D to start off with, and our display settings. I just like to have this set to constant shading lines so that we can see our lines and our edges as we work. I'll drop in a plane here so that we can work on this plane. Now we need to make this editable so that we can use the Polygon pen tool on it. So you can do that by clicking this icon down here or using the C hotkey. So I'll go ahead and click that there. Now our plane is an editable mesh, which is looking good. The next thing that I'd like to just show you is that you can find the Polygon pen up here. You can also see the hotkey for it is ME. So that's what we can use for this tool. And I'll use the hotkey ME to get started. Now, just off the bat, it's good to know some of the things you can do with this. If I were to take a look at this tool in here, and you can see it's all listed within our attributes manager, you can lock this or unlock this, depending on how you'd like to work. You'll see that we have options here. We have draw mode. And in the past, we've adjusted if we're adjusting points, edges, or polygons up here. But here, the focus is actually you want to click on these settings here to control the pen tool to let it know what you want to do. So that's just good to know. Now, what we want to do is first show how this works with polygons. And this tool, again, can do a lot of different things. You can adjust your polygon brush radius here, which makes it easier to decide how much you want to press. You can do this with the middle mouse button. You can also adjust it manually here. I like to use the middle mouse button. And another way you can do that is with the bracket keys. You can use the left bracket to make it smaller, the right bracket to make it larger. So those are a good place to start with, just being aware, and that'll make it easier to select your polygons. Now this tool has a lot of hotkeys. You can remember Control as what you can use to melt away polygons. So similar to the melt tool we've used in the past, you can use it in a sense with the Polygon pen. So I'll hold Control and I'll click here, and that polygon is melted. We can do that along here. You can do the same thing with edges. So if we go into edge mode, you can now melt your edges as well, and we can go through here. You can melt points. So if I hold Control and click on points, they'll be removed. So Control will let you melt away geometry regardless of what mode you're in. The draw mode will just affect what you're melting. So that's the first thing to be aware of. We can also build some geometry with the Polygon pen. which makes sense given its name. It can also literally build polygons. So we can click and drag this over here, and you can see it's dragging it, and now it's snapping and it's welding to this other edge here. Now this is welded. It's a lot like the welding tool. Going to hit undo. If you hold Control and then click and then drag, you'll see we have a whole other outcome. It's a lot like the bridge tool and a lot like the welding tool, because the snaps together and it welds, and it also creates this new polygon here connecting them, which reminds me a little bit of the bridge tool, which we've also covered. So hopefully talking about that is helping you connect those dots in your mind. It helps to make those connections to remember it. And you'll also notice that when we hold Control, click and drag, it creates this edge. Whereas if we just click and drag, it doesn't create any edges, but it does snap and weld. So there's two different ways you can go about that. Control, click and drag, snap without any control used. And you can do this, we're in point mode right now, so you can do that in that mode. You can also do this in this mode. You can Control, click and drag, or click and drag. This works about the same. So it's just something to be aware of. That's an option in here. So you can see how this might be good for topology. Now there's some interesting things you can do with polygons, which are rather fun. So let's go back over to here. I'm going to click on this polygon, holding Control. So we're clicking and holding Control, and we're going to drag up. From the center of the polygon, we are extruding, so this may remind you of the extrude tool. We are extruding up, which is really interesting. You can hit Control, click, and drag to extrude again, but this time we'll hold down Shift at the end of that. So I'm not holding Shift, now I am, and we can twist this after extruding it in any direction we want by moving the mouse back and forth. Something to keep in mind with the extrude that I'd like to show you is what happens if we create a cut on one of these and then try to extrude that. So we've covered the knife tool in the past, or the line cut tool. It's changed names over Cinema 4D's history. So we're going to create a cut in here. If you'd like to see that episode and learn more about that tool, all the tools I'm referencing today from past episodes, I will leave in the description below. So if you want to learn them, you can, if you're a newer person to this series. So let's go ahead and use the hotkey MK to pull up this tool here. I'll actually unlock that so we can see our knife cut tools, or line cut tools. Our visible only is on, so that's good. I'll just create a cut right here and hit escape. So now we have a cut. I'll go back to my polygon pen tool with ME. Good practice to remember that. And here you'll see we have this create coplanar edge on extrude. So right now we're extruding, so it's a good time to cover this. Something you can do is if you leave this off and you extrude down, you'll see it's just extruding down as normal, and it's not having edges there. Now I'm going to hit undo. If we turn on create coplanar edge on extrude, you might be wondering what they're talking about when they say coplanar edge on extrude. Now I'm going to hit Control, and we're going to do the same action again, and you can see what is happening. There is a hole in there, but it's creating these edges, these coplanar edges that are coplanar with these other walls here. That's just something to keep in mind. That is what that is doing. And now I'm going to turn this off since you have a good understanding of how that works. This option, auto weld, we've had on this whole time. And that means that when we hold control and connect these, it automatically welds, as well as if we click and drag on an edge and it connects, it automatically welds. If we turn this off, it'll turn off the weld. You'll notice that quad strip mode is disabled. So the reason why that is also grayed out is because we're in polygons as our draw mode. This option is only available in points and edges mode. So you can see that is no longer grayed out in both of these modes. So let's talk about what these do. Quad strip mode will restrict when you're creating new geometry to be quads. So we were clicking and dragging before, and then if we held control, we could click and drag, and that would create a quad. But if you could actually, in theory, connect a lot of other edges. So I'm going to actually go ahead and delete some of these so that we have a more interesting shape to look at. So here we go. We are in edge mode. And this goes for both. If we click on a point and click on another point and click on another point, click on another point, another point, you could see that we can really start creating some things that aren't quads. Now, if we turn on quad strip mode, we click, 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 and click, it'll automatically make a quad because we've clicked on 4 points and that's enough to make a quad. With quad strip mode turned off, it won't create a quad. The same thing goes for if you're in points mode. If you're in points mode and you have quad strip mode on, if I click on 4 points, it'll automatically assume that I want to make a quad. If I were to hit undo and turn off quad strip mode, and start clicking on points in point mode, you can see we're doing the same thing as before where I can make an n-gon. You can't do that with quad strip mode on. So that's what that does. It's just good to be aware of. Reproject result is a really fun tool. So let's go ahead and drop a sphere into our scene. I'm holding a click on this cube and I'm dropping in a sphere here. I'm going to move it over like this. And let's talk a little bit about what we can do here. I'll click ME to bring up our polygon pen. I may actually want to turn on my snap. It'll work a little bit better. I'm going to enable the snap here, and we want to snap to edges, points, and polygons. That looks pretty good. So now I can snap, and we have our first edge. Okay, so it's not a polygon yet, but we're going to make it into one. So I'll just draw a polygon on here. That's a good start. So there's something cool you can do with this. If you hold down Shift while in polygon mode, so let's hold Shift, and we're going to click on this, and let me see here. I'm going to actually, for this instance, turn off enable snap. So since we have reproject result on, if I hold shift and click, you'll see that this is now drawing on here, which is really fun. And it's pretty much projected on here except for when I start drawing off the sphere from my camera perspective. I'm going to move the sphere up a little bit more, along with our polygon. So that's better. What I may do is just shrink down this polygon a little bit. And let's go ahead and do that again because that's a lot of fun. And you can really get pretty intricate with this. So you can think of a lot of different things you can create with this. You could create headbands for characters. You could create belts. You could create some swirls like what I'm doing here. I find that sometimes these get twisted if I move my mouse too quickly, or if I'm at an odd camera angle. So I find that it helps to keep this at a pretty decent camera angle here. And if you, of course, aren't happy with your geometry, you can remember that we can hold Control to melt away anything that we don't like. So if you don't like these last two polygons, there you go, they're gone. So this is something that I just find fun because it really opens a lot of possibilities, and this is something that's truly unique to the Polygon pen. There's no other tools that I've seen inside of Cinema 4D that easily replicate this kind of modeling. I'll go ahead and delete those since they're getting a little twisted. And again, I'm just holding shift and I'm dragging, and this option is only available with polygons turned on as your draw mode. I'm going to turn off the grid right now so they can still see things clearly. I'm in the filter, work plane. It's also called the work plane. I'll just turn that off from the view. So here we go. And this is what I'm talking about with creating something abstract. You can get in a lot of practice with these tools just by creating something fun, trying out the hotkeys. And the really cool thing is that then once you're done, you can hide the sphere and you have this really cool shape here that you can use for a lot of different things. You could put something on a character's head this way. You can actually retopologize a character if you get a character that is just, its geometry is a mess and the remesh tool is not going to work for rigging it. You can retopologize the entire character using the Polygon pen. You can draw polygons on it, you can extrude them and add to them to the shape of the character, and then you could use the vamp tool that we went over before in here when we were talking about normals previously in another episode. But in the vamp manager, which Cinema 4D renamed Property Transfer Manager. So they rename things and sometimes it throws me off even a little bit. They renamed this. Now it's called Property Transfer Manager. And maybe that's easier for new people joining Cinema 4D to understand actually. So that change makes sense. But you can transfer over textures, your mapping, UVs, all of this stuff you can transfer over. So if you do retopologize a character, this is what you'd want to use if they're already textured. Hopefully they're not, and you can just rebuild their topology and start from a place that's a little bit easier. So this is pretty fun. Before we move forward, I'd like to show another example. You'll see that this is actually a very dense mesh that I have in here. Especially if I zoom in closer, you can see this doesn't have good topology. And I did that on purpose so that we have a model that we can show an example on. The pen tool is really good for retopologizing models that maybe were 3D scanned, that don't have great topology, that have just a ton of polygons, need to really be simplified down. You can retopologize characters with it. But just to understand, first of all, you can draw polygons with the Polygon pen. And you'll notice that before I close this Polygon pen, we can actually move around these edges. We can move around the points. We can snap them to other objects. So all of those capabilities are available before you actually close the polygon. And you can make polygons in any shape you'd like to enclose it. So that's the first thing to be aware of with this tool. And we were talking about reproject result. So I have reproject result on for right now. And I can actually go ahead and start building on this character. And if I want to, I can even turn on symmetry right now. So what I'll do is I'll add in a polygon right here. And now that we've done that, I can begin drawing on here using the Polygon pen. So let's say we want to build a new mesh. I'm going to move this point. We can connect this a little bit later, but you can see that this is one way to begin building a new mesh. So I'll close that and you can see that it's symmetrical on both sides. And we're going to be going through the symmetry tool a little bit more in the future, as I had mentioned. But with project on, these are just automatically being built on top of the existing character. We might need to clean up the center a little bit manually at the end. And we could go around this entire model and rebuild it this way. So that's what I really want to show you. And then once you're done retopologizing this character and making the polygons nice and neat and easy to rig, you can hide the original model and you'll just be left with your clean mesh. So that's what I want to show you with the Polygon pen. So you can use it not only for creating new models, but for really fixing up old ones as well. Okay, so now we have this swirly sphere here that is kind of fun looking. And something that I'd like to show you on here are some more options with extruding. So maybe I'll actually show it over here on this piece of geometry or plane. But when you can extrude from here. If you hold down Control, you can also extrude edges. So we're extruding edges. And similar to extruding polygons and how you can hold Shift and start twisting them, you can do the same thing with edges with the Polygon pen. If you hold Shift, you can start twisting them as well. That's just good to be aware of. You can do more things with this tool. We can even create curves with this. Create n-gons. That just, if you turn that on, it'll allow you to create n-gons. If you turn it off, it won't allow you to create n-gons. So the first thing that I'd like to show you before we go through the create semicircle settings is that you can see this is one edge here. And we can subdivide it. So since we're going through semicircle settings, that's going to involve subdivision, so this will help you understand it. So if I hit the middle mouse button, I can drag my mouse and you'll see it says sub 5, sub 6, sub 10 as I keep dragging this. That's how many times it's subdividing that edge. And if I go back into our brush selection and select these individual edges here, you can see that they've been subdivided. I'm going to hit undo until that's a normal edge. Let's say, what if, instead of just holding down the middle mouse button to subdivide this, we wanted to subdivide it and add a curve? Well, we can do that. And actually for right now, I'm going to show you how to do it without a perfect semicircle. So I'm going to turn off create semicircle. I'll hold down Control and Shift and drag my mouse over this edge. I'll hit undo one more time so that it is one edge and it'll be easier for you to see. I'll hit Control and Shift and drag my mouse over this edge, and you can see that as I move my mouse, we're actually creating an edge here. That is a circle, and you can pull this whichever amount you want to. We can do this, we could do this, and make some funky shapes this way. If you increase these arc subdivisions here, it will smooth this out. You can see how this one is much smoother than this one here. It's because we've increased the arc subdivisions. Now there's no way to know if anything that I was drawing here is a perfect semicircle. It's just random wherever I click my mouse. What if we want it to be a perfect semicircle? Maybe you are 3D modeling something that needs to be very exact and you don't want to just eyeball it. You want that semicircle to be an exact semicircle. Well, in that case, what you do is you click this button here and you do the same thing as before. You click on an edge and you can see no matter how far I move my mouse, it's going to make that a perfect semicircle every single time. And maybe that'll help you with your project. That's actually a pretty cool looking shape right there. We could even do this on here and it'd be really fun. So you can see how you can get some really interesting shapes on here. And you can feel pretty free to do whatever, especially when you're creating something a little bit more abstract, which is fun. I'm going to click ME again. You can also adjust the arc direction or angle, and maybe you'll see that a little bit better over here. So I'll go back over to our plane we were experimenting with. And as we were adding in arcs here and semicircles here, they were all pretty much coming in flat because of the way we were working. What if we change this to 0 degrees now? Need to make sure we have this selected. Now you can see that that is going a different angle. So that angle there is adjusting this. So now it's curved up. That's kind of interesting, honestly. I'll try ME again. We can adjust the degrees. So now it's sticking back down. If you right click on these arrows, it'll just set it back to where it was before. I'm going to make this 45 degrees. But that gives you an idea. So if we want to go into our sphere, we can go ahead and round out these edges if we want to make it a little bit more curved feeling. And I think that one kind of looks like a heart. But this is a fun tool. I'll just round all these out here because that looks nicer than a hard edge, especially when this is so curvy. If you hold shift and click on an edge, you'll just add in a point there. So you can also break these up a little bit if you want. If you go into here, you can even click and create an edge there. And then I can hold down Control and create a hole there along that edge. So you can even create edges with this. I'm in edge mode. I'm just clicking in places and creating more edges. So you can create edges, you can remove edges, you can extrude edges, polygons, points. You can really do anything with this tool. You can draw new polygons. It's pretty incredible and you can go pretty crazy with it. You can draw out here in space and then create a polygon in the center. Okay, so there's really only one more setting left to go over, and it's pretty simple. And this is for in cases if you have a really dense mesh, which we don't usually work with in here, but we will work with more once you start working with the sculpting tools. So I'll go ahead and show this quickly. But what this allows you to do is decide what you want to click on. So this is designed for dense meshes where it might be hard to select a point or select an edge or select a polygon. If you have 10,000 of them and they're very small like that, all of a sudden it becomes really hard to click on things. So tweaking mode lets you select specific things. So let's say we only want to adjust points right now. Now I can only select points. I can't select edges. I can't select polygons. If I choose edges, we can only select edges. If I choose polygons, we only select polygons. I know I said that was the last thing to show you, but I have one more left to show you because I almost forgot it. So in the polygon pen, I'm just going to go ahead and close this. I'll go into the top view. I want to create a polygon there. So in points mode, let's say if you want to close something off, you actually can do that if you just want to fill in a shape there. I'll make this a little bit of a bigger hole. If I go into points and I click on this point and I click on this point, So it'll automatically close. The reason why it wasn't automatically closing before was because I had quad strip mode on, so that was throwing it off. So if yours isn't closing, it may be because you have quad strip on. So you could see if I click on here and I click on here, it's waiting for the other 2 points to create a quad. But if you turn that off and you're in points mode and you click on 2 edges where there's an opening, it'll automatically just fill that in. So it's a little bit like the close polygon hole tool. I mean, you might need to fix the topology a little bit in here and create some edges after that. But that's how you could go about that. So I just wanted you to know I can also close things. And I had a lot of fun 3D modeling with you, of course. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. And we're going to be going into sculpting tools next, so I hope you'll stay tuned for that. See you next time on Ambient 3D Animations.